Shalom and welcome to this teaching. This teaching is called Jacob Have I Loved. Messianics usually like this teaching for different reasons. For one, it sheds new light on our patriarch Jacob. Two, it gives a pro-Jewish view of the story of Jacob's life. And three, it opens up new ideas by taking a critical look at translational errors. Now, before we start, I do have a couple disclaimers. There are many different people from different denominations probably watching. Some come from a Baptist background, some from a Church of God background, or an Assembly of God background, or Seventh-day, or what have you. Some of you may still attend those churches. I assume that you are watching us because you have some kind of a desire to learn about Torah. And that's no problem. But what we want to ask you is to please, when you listen to these teachings, don't go back to your churches and tell your pastor how he's got it all wrong and that Rabbi Stanley is going to straighten him out. Or don't go back and tell your pastor he's going to hell for lying to you. That's not the way to approach it. We're not trying to make enemies with the local churches. In fact, we're trying to educate them and instill in them a love for Israel. That is our goal. As far as their theology not being correct, we're not going to change their minds overnight. We have to remember they haven't sat through this particular teaching that you're going to be sitting through. And without a PowerPoint or all that information right in front of you, you may not be able to present the case in the best way possible, and you may even end up doing more harm than good. We do want you to share your newfound knowledge, but please do so in a way that doesn't harm the believers who are truly seeking after Yeshua, and try to move forward in humility. We want to be friendly to other churches. We want to reform it. So please try to keep that in mind. So we're going to talk about Jacob Have I Loved. Here's how the story is usually told concerning Jacob. These are elements from various Sunday school teachings that I've heard throughout the years, as well as some teachings from Bible schools and seminary and so forth. You may not have heard all of them before, but see if you recognize a few of them. These ideas are out there, and here's what is usually said. They say Isaac and Rebekah had twin boys. One was good and one was bad. Esau was the good boy, and his father Isaac really loved him. But Jacob, he was a rascal, always getting into trouble when he was a kid. Jacob was a very tricky boy. That's why he was named Jacob, which means supplanter and deceiver, you know. We know that's true because we can read that right in the footnotes of our Bibles. When Jacob was a teenager, they say, he tricked Esau out of his birthright, and the birthright was his inheritance. Isaac was very wealthy, and Jacob was a bit of a money grubber. You know how those greedy Jews are. So he tricked poor Esau and stole his birthright from him. Not only that, they say, Jacob lied to his poor old innocent dad, and Jacob's mother, Rebekah, helped him in his lies. What a bad mother. They go on. Later, Jacob wrestled with an angel, and the angel changed his name from Jacob to Israel. From then on, Jacob was a good man, well, at least better than he was before. Does any of that sound familiar to you? About 90% of that story is incorrect. So let's start from the beginning and see where the problem starts, and that's in Genesis 25:23. In the beginning of the story, we see that there is a prophecy that is given. It says in Genesis 25:23, and he told her, your two sons will become two separate nations. The younger of the two will be stronger, and the older will be his servant. This prophecy given says that Esau, the elder, would serve the younger Jacob. Let's keep that in mind for later. Then Rebekah gives birth to the twin boys. This is in Genesis 25:24. It says, and when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. And the first came out red all over like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. And after that came his brother out, and his hand took hold on Esau's heel, and his name was called Jacob. And Isaac was 80 years old when she bare them. So basically Esau is the first. He is rough and hairy, so they named him Esau. Esau in Hebrew means rough and hairy. Jacob then comes out, and he is holding on to Esau's heel. And this is as he's coming out of the birth canal. So he is named Yaakov. Yaakov in Hebrew means heel grabber. That's how babies were named in ancient times in that part of the world. There's really no big mystery there. It does not mean supplanter or deceiver, as many notes will tell you in your translation of the Bible. Another thing to think about is this. What mother in their right mind would have a baby and look at their newborn infant son and say, well, now there's a supplanter if I ever saw one. That baby is a deceiver, I'll tell you that. Who says something like that? Every mother I've ever known has said, oh, isn't he the most beautiful baby you've ever seen? I know it sounds absurd, but that's exactly what we're taught in Sunday school and in seminary. Esau was named simply by how he looked, and Jacob was named simply for what he was doing. Let's read on. In chapter 25-27, we begin to learn about the character of these two men. It says this in 25-27, the boys grew up, and Esau became a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, while Jacob was a plain man dwelling in tents. Notice here it says a man, not boy. It says a man of the open country, while Jacob was a plain man. We'll get more into their ages at the very end of this teaching. So here in Genesis 25-27, we get an understanding of what these two men were like. This is a character assessment. One, Esau is a skillful hunter, a man of the open country, and the other, Jacob, says the translation, is a plain man dwelling in tents. Now some translations here say that Jacob was a quiet man dwelling in tents, but it's still kind of the same idea. Quiet, plain, average maybe. Esau, however, is the outdoors type, kind of a man's man, the hunter or John Wayne type maybe. In contrast, I kind of get the idea that Jacob is a mama's boy. Dad's favorite is the hunter and mom's favorite is the quiet lad. Jacob sounds almost boring in this assessment. Well, let's look at this word plain or quiet in Hebrew. This word in Hebrew is pronounced Tom. If you were going to transliterate it, it'd be T-A-W-M, Tom. And it is used 18 times in the Old Testament. It is translated by the King James Version with these 3 English words. The first one is perfect. We read in Job 1:1. There was a man in the land of Uz, whose name was Job, and that man was a perfect, a Tom, an upright man, and one that feared God and eschewed evil. Another place is the second way that it's used is in Proverbs 10:29. It says, the way of the Lord is strength to the upright, to the Tom, but destruction shall be the workers of iniquity. The third way that this word has been translated is undefiled. We see in the Song of Solomon 5:2. It says, I sleep, but my heart waketh. It is the voice of my beloved that knocketh, saying, open to me, my sister, my love, my dove, my undefiled, my Tom. For my head is filled with dew, and my locks with the drops of the night. Of the 18 times the word Tom is used, these 3 words, perfect, upright, and undefiled, make up 17 of those times. One time, and one time only, the word Tom is used as the word plain, and that's when describing one of our Jewish patriarchs. Why did the King James translators use plain instead of upright, undefiled, or perfect? Because when the King James Version was being translated, England was in the process of driving out all of the Jews from their country and confiscating everything that the Jews owned. And every chance they got, they slanted the translations against the Jewish people. You see it time and time again when you read it in English, and then when you go and look in the original Hebrew, you see a major difference. It is a travesty. No wonder people get wrong theological ideas from the English versions. That's all they have, I understand that. Most people in English-speaking countries don't speak Hebrew or Greek. So they read passages that sound as if they are against the Jews, and then they label them as Christ killers. They fail to realize that the Bible is a book written by Jews. So England was kicking their Jews out of the country. So the translators weren't about to say anything nice about them if they didn't have to. So they slanted the translation when they could get away with it. And this was one of those times. This translation should have said, "And Jacob was an upright man dwelling in tents," or "And Jacob was an undefiled man dwelling in tents," or "And Jacob was a perfect man dwelling in tents." Oh, well, that's going too far. Nobody's perfect. Well, was it going too far when they translated it that way concerning Job? We read in Job 1:1, there was a man, we just read it, in the land of Uz, whose name was Job, and that man was a perfect and upright man, and one that feared God and eschewed evil. They translated it perfect there. Some scholars like to point out that Job was a Gentile. Is that why the Gentile translators gave him such a good character assessment? They must have forgot Job was a convert to Judaism. If the translators would have said that Jacob was a perfect man dwelling in tents right from the beginning, we wouldn't have all had these misunderstandings in the first place. If they would have said Jacob was a perfect man dwelling in tents, that would have given us a very different picture, wouldn't it have? There's a big difference between plain and perfect, isn't there? I think we can show there is a big difference from Scripture. Let's look again in the Song of Solomon, chapter 5, verse 2. Here we see Solomon calling out to his lover. We've just read it, "I sleep, but my heart waketh. It is the voice of my beloved that knocketh, saying, Open to me, my sister, my love, my dove, my plain one." If he had called her his plain one, do you think she would have even opened the door? I don't think so. So do you see how important it is to learn Hebrew? Can you see how one word can change the entire meaning of a story? If this doesn't convince you why it's important to learn the holy language, then in my opinion, nothing will. Let's move on to the next part of our story, the birthright. There are two parts of the birthright that were given to the oldest son in ancient Judaism. One was a double portion of the physical inheritance to the firstborn. That would be goods, land, flocks, and so forth. That is then divided by the number of heirs plus one, double to the firstborn. Let me explain that for you. If you have 5 children, you divide everything in 6 ways, and the firstborn gets 2 parts, and the rest get 1 part. That's how things were divided for the physical part of the birthright. The second part was the spiritual birthright. With this went the right to have the Messiah born through your line. In other words, if you received that part of the birthright, Yeshua would have been your great-great-great-great-grandson. And this is the part that Jacob wanted. Jacob didn't care about material things. He cared about the things of God. Esau, on the other hand, did not care about spiritual things. If you read on in the story, you'll find that Jacob didn't get any of the physical inheritance. Who got that? Esau did. Jacob didn't. Jacob knew he was going to have to flee from Esau's wrath, and he did. Esau got everything except the spiritual part of the birthright. Now, did Jacob steal that from Esau? Did Jacob trick him out of it? Well, let's understand some things in Jewish custom. In ancient Jewish custom, the eldest was supposed to make a special meal of lentils in honor and memory of past loved ones that had died in that week for any of the previous years. We still do a remembrance of our past loved ones to this day in Judaism. It's called Yitzkor. Some still even make the lentil stew. The eldest was supposed to make this meal of lentils, but Esau wasn't doing it. He was out doing what he liked to do. He was out hunting. Jacob, however, was preparing the meal because he wanted to honor his past loved one. In this case, he was doing it for his grandfather, Abraham. The eldest was also supposed to fast while he made this meal, just for one day. So Esau was out hunting. He didn't catch anything. He was fasting for the day, and this is what he says when he comes in. It says, and Esau said to Jacob, feed me, I pray thee, with that same red pottage, for I am faint. And therefore his name was called Edom. And Jacob said, sell me this day thy birthright. And Esau said, behold, I am at the point to die, and what profit shall this birthright do to me? So Esau's being a little bit dramatic here. He's saying he's going to die from one day of fasting. You don't die from one day without food. And Jacob says what to him? And Jacob says in verse 31, and Jacob said, sell me this day thy birthright. Sell, not give, sell it to me. And how does Esau reply to that? He says, well, what profit does this birthright do for me? It doesn't do me any good. He certainly wasn't talking about the physical part of the birthright. That did have some profitable value. Esau was talking about the spiritual part of the inheritance. There wasn't any profit in that. Jacob, on the other hand, he cared about spiritual things. It was important to him. Later on in the story, we see Esau trying to get the blessing after all. It wasn't his to get. Right? He had sold it. He sold it, and then he tried to get it back anyways. Who's the cheater now? He sold it. It wasn't his to get, but Esau was trying to get it anyway. Esau was the cheater. Esau was the trickster, not Jacob. Now let's look at the part where Jacob lied to his poor, innocent father. It says this in the 27:1. It's a little bit long, but follow with me. And it came to pass that when Isaac was old, and his eyes were dim, so that he could not see, he called Esau his eldest son, and said unto him, my son. And he said unto him, behold, here am I. And he said, behold, now I am old, I know not the day of my death. Now therefore take, I pray thee, thy weapons, thy quiver and thy bow, and go out to the field, and take me some venison. And make me some savory meat, such as I love, and bring it to me, that I may eat, that my soul may bless thee before I die. And Rebekah heard when Isaac spoke to Esau his son, and Esau went to the field to hunt for venison, and to bring it. And Rebekah spake unto Jacob her son, saying, behold, I heard thy father speak unto Esau thy brother, saying, bring me venison, and make me savory meat, that I may eat, and bless thee before the Lord before my death. Now therefore, my son, obey my voice according to that which I command thee. Go now to the flock, and fetch for me thence 2 kid goats, and I will make them savory meat for thy father, such as he loveth. And thou shalt bring it to thy father, that he may eat, that he may bless thee before his death. And Jacob said to Rebekah his mother, behold, Esau my brother is a hairy man, and I am a smooth man. My father peradventure will feel me, and shall seem to him, and I shall seem to him as a deceiver, and I shall bring a curse upon me, and not a blessing. And his mother said unto him, upon me be thy curse, my son, only obey my voice, and go thence, and fetch me this. And he went and fetched and brought them to his mother. And his mother made savory meat, such as his father loved. And Rebekah took goodly raiment of her eldest son Esau, which were with her in the house, and put them upon Jacob her younger son. And she put the skins of the kids of the goats upon his hands, and upon the smooth of his neck. And she gave the savory meat and the bread which he had prepared into the hand of her son Jacob. And he came unto his father and said, My father. And he said, Here am I. Who art thou, my son? And Jacob said unto his father, I am Esau, thy firstborn. I have done according as thou biddest me. Arise, I pray thee, sit and eat of my venison, that thy soul may bless me. And Isaac said unto his son, How is it that thou hast found it so quickly, my son? And he said, Because the Lord thy God brought it to me. And Isaac said unto Jacob, Come near, I pray thee, that I may feel thee, my son, whether thou be my very son Esau or not. And Jacob went near unto Isaac his father, and he felt him, and said, The voice is Jacob's voice, but the hands are the hands of Esau. And he discerned him not, his hands, because his hands were hairy as his brother's Esau's hands. So he blessed him. And he said, Art thou my very son Esau? And he said, I am. And he said, Bring it near to me, and I will eat of my son's venison, that my soul may bless thee. And he brought it near to him, and he did eat. And he brought him wine, and he drank. And his father Isaac said unto him, Come near now, and kiss me, my son. And he came near and kissed him, and he smelled the smell of his raiment, and blessed him, and said, See, the smell of my son is as the smell of a field which the Lord has blessed. Therefore God give thee of the dew of heaven, and the fatness of the earth, and the plenty of corn and wine. Let the people serve thee, and nations bow down to thee. Be Lord over thy brethren, and let thy mother's sons bow down to thee. Cursed be every one that curses thee, and blessed be he that blesses thee. And it came to pass, as soon as Isaac had made an end of the blessing for Jacob, and Jacob was yet scarce gone out of the presence of Isaac his father, that Esau his brother came in from his hunting. So yes, it is true, Jacob lied to his father 4 times, and there is no excuse for that. But have you ever wondered why Isaac was so suspicious about the person coming to him for the blessing? 3 times he asks who he is. He has to feel his arm and the back of his neck. Why all this suspicion? Was it just because he heard the voice of Jacob, or was there something else going on here? This brings us back to the prophecy before they were born. It had already been prophesied that the elder would serve the younger. Isaac knew that the blessing was supposed to go to Jacob, but Esau was his favorite. That's why he was so suspicious. Isaac knew that what he was about to do was wrong. He knew he wasn't supposed to give that blessing to Esau. He knew, and so he was acting very suspiciously. Isaac wasn't innocent. He knew. Jacob lied to his dad 4 times. Let's notice, though, that these are the only recorded sins of Jacob in all of the scriptures. 4 sins. For all we know, those could have been his only sins ever. What if that was true? 4 sins in your whole life. If you have only committed 4 sins in your life, just 4 lies, wouldn't you be a Tom man, a perfect man? You could easily be called a Tom person, an upright person, an undefiled person, a perfect person dwelling in tents. Now, what about Jacob's mother? Was she being a bad mom? No, not really. She was trying to get Jacob what was rightfully his. She did it in the wrong way, that's true. She knew about the prophecy as well, and she should have trusted God that he'd make sure that his word came true. But she was a godly woman, not a bad mother by any means. So don't take my word for all of this. Let's see how God sees the story. God is the perfect judge, correct? Let's see what he says about Jacob and Esau. Malachi 1 verse 2 and 3 says this, I have loved you, saith the Lord. Yet ye say, wherein hast thou loved us? Was not Esau Jacob's brother, saith the Lord? Yet I loved Jacob, and I hated Esau, and laid his mountains and his heritage waste for the dragons of the wilderness. Wow, it says here that God hated Esau, and he loved Jacob. Now, some teach that God didn't hate Esau, only hated his sin. God doesn't have a speech impediment. He knows how to say if he hates someone's sin, and he knows how to say that he hates Esau. But God is love. My pastor told me so. Well, your pastor only told you half of the story, because God can hate too. Well, that's all Old Testament anyways. Then Jesus came, and we're now all fuzzy little lambs full of love. Really? Here's what it says in the New Testament, Romans 9:13. As it is written, Jacob have I loved, but Esau have I hated. What then are we to say? Is there injustice on the part of God? Of course not. God hated Esau so much he repeated it in the New Testament. Here's a news flash. The God of the Old Testament is the same God of the New Testament. Tell your pantheistic pastor that. I can't tell you how many pastors I've heard use those words, the God of the Old Testament. See, they worship more than one God. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Hear, O Israel, there is only one God. Well, why did God hate Esau so much then? Because we read in Genesis 25:17, Then Jacob gave Esau bread and pottage of lentils, and he did eat and drink, and rose up, and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Esau despised the things of God. He didn't care if God's only son was to be from his lineage. He only cared about himself and about the here and the now. God despises those kinds of people. But God loves everyone. He didn't love Esau. It's in both testaments. I don't claim to fully understand the perfect love of God, and I don't claim to fully understand the perfect hate of God, but I do know that both exist. And to say that God doesn't hate anyone is clearly not true, as verified in those two passages. Let's go to the next part of the story. Jacob's name was never changed. Yes, it was. It says right here. It says in Genesis 32:28, And he said, Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. It says right there. This wasn't a name change. Jacob was given a title. Yisrael, in Hebrew it means a man who is a prince with God. Yis is a form from Ish, which means man in Hebrew. Ra is a borrowed word in Hebrew from Sanskrit, meaning prince, and El means God. Expositors vary on this, and some will translate it as a man who struggles with God. But the interpretation is right there in the biblical text. Right there in 32:28, And he said, Thy name shall be called no more Jacob, but Israel. For as a prince hast thou power with God and with men, and hast prevailed. It's right there in the same verse. It was a title given to Jacob, not a name change. Now, Abram was given a name change. His name was changed to Abraham. We know that Abram was given a name change because from that point on, throughout all of Scripture, he is then called Abraham. Not so with Jacob. Time and time again, after this supposed name change, we see the Bible say things such as, I am the father of Abraham, Isaac, and who? Jacob. Jacob, not Israel. See, when God changes your name, it stays changed. Okay? Jacob never got his name changed. He was given a title. We also have to take notice that he didn't wrestle with an angel. 2 short verses later it says this in verse 30. And Jacob called the name of the place Peniel, for I have seen God face to face, and my life is preserved. not an angel. And because we know that no man can see the face of God the Father, then whose face did Jacob see? He saw Yeshua's face. So Jacob didn't straighten up after some name change. He was always good. He was a Tom man dwelling in tents. Now let's look at how old they were at the time of the birthright story, and then we'll close with that. In Sunday school, we're shown pictures, just like the one you see here on this slide. They showed Jacob and Esau kind of like they were teenagers when this story took place. We see another picture here, Jacob with the pot of lentils and the hunter Esau with his slingshot. These are the kind of images that we see. They weren't two kids. This is not a story of one young kid tricking or outwitting another child. When this happened, they were old men. Old men? Yes, old men. Both of them knew exactly what they were doing. How can we know their ages? First, we have to start with the age of Joseph in Egypt, and then we have to work our way backwards. And this is mathematical. You can look it up. It's by the numbers. We can do this mathematically. First, we look in Genesis 30, verses 46 and 47. Joseph was 30 years old when he became number 2 in the land under Pharaoh. He was 37 at the end of the 7 years of plenty. Then we see in Genesis 45 that in the 2nd year of the famine, the household of Jacob then came to Egypt. Joseph is now 39 years old. In Genesis 47:9, in the 2nd year of the famine, when Jacob came to Egypt, Jacob was then 130 years old. So subtracting Joseph's age of 39 from Jacob's age of 130, we find that Jacob was 91 years old when Joseph was born. So now we go to the years that Jacob worked for his uncle Laban. Genesis 29:18 to 26, we see that Jacob worked 7 years for Rachel, but Laban gave him Leah instead. Verses 27 and 28, we see that Jacob agreed to work for another 7 years because he loved Rachel so much. In Genesis 30:25 and 26, Joseph, the firstborn of Rachel, this is Jacob's 11th son, he was born at the end of Jacob's 14-year contract with Laban. Since Jacob was 91 when Joseph was born, we know he was 77 years old when he came to his uncle Laban, because 91 minus 14 is 77. So since the journey to Padam Aram would take less than 1 year, Jacob was 76 years old when he fled from Esau because of the birthright. Let's remember what the passage said earlier in Genesis 25. Esau was a cunning hunter, a man of the field, and Jacob was a Tom man dwelling in tents. These weren't two young boys. So let's now recap so we understand this completely. 1. Jacob doesn't mean supplanter or deceiver. 2. Jacob didn't steal the birthright. It was sold to him. 3. Did Jacob get the physical birthright, the money? No, Esau got that. 4. Was Rebekah a bad mother? No, she was trying to get Jacob what was rightfully his. 5. Was Esau the poor kid who got tricked out of his inheritance? No, Esau, the old man, got his money and still tried to cheat Jacob out of what Esau had sold him. 6. Did Jacob get his name changed? No, he didn't. Jacob was given a title. His name was never changed. 7. After he was given a title, did he then straighten up? No. Jacob was good from the beginning. He was a perfect man, an undefiled man, an upright man. He was a Tom man dwelling in tents. 8. Will many have to apologize to Jacob when they see him in heaven? Yes, I think they will. I hope you enjoyed this teaching. Shalom, shalom.
cascading down a creek. But little streams have bigger dreams to soar as oceans break, and build an arching rainbow, reflecting heaven's rays. Creator, builder of mountains and painter of skies. Creator, sovereign of seasons and giver of life. Creator, displaying to nations your beauty and might. Open our